Now I saw in my dream that by this time the pilgrims had gotten past the enchanted ground. They were now entering into the country of Beulah, where the air is sweet and refreshing. Since their way lay directly through it, they enjoyed some peace and comfort there for a time. They enjoyed every day they spent in that place, seeing lovely flowers and hearing the continual singing of birds. In this country the sun shines night and day. Thus it is beyond the valley of the shadow of death. It is also out of the reach of giant despair. They could not so much as catch a glimpse of Doubting Castle here. Quite the contrary, here they were able to see the city of their destination, because it was on the border of heaven. The Shining Ones commonly walked in this land. Also in this land the covenant between the bride and the bridegroom was renewed. Yes, here as a bridegroom rejoices over his bride, so their God rejoices over them. Here they had no lack of food or wine, for the place is filled with an abundance of all they had been seeking in their pilgrimage. They were able to hear voices from the city, loud voices proclaiming, "Say to the daughter of Zion, surely your salvation is coming. Behold, his reward is with him." All the inhabitants of the country called them the holy people, the redeemed of the Lord. Now as they walked over this land, they did more rejoicing than they had in all the other places in their journey put together. As they drew near to the city, they had an even more wonderful view of it. It was constructed of pearls and other precious stones, and they could see a street paved with gold. The beauty of the city and the radiance of the sunbeams coming from it were such a glorious sight that Christian became sick with intense longing. Hopeful also was stricken with the same affliction, and because of their pangs they lay there for some time, crying out, "If you find my beloved one, tell him that I am sick with love." After a time, however, their strength was renewed, and they were more able to bear their sickness, and so they continued on their way. As they came nearer and nearer to the city, they saw beautiful orchards, vineyards, and gardens with gates opening into the highway. As they approached one such gate, a gardener was standing there, and they asked, "Whose lovely vineyards and gardens are these?" He replied, "They are the king's, and they are planted here for his delight, and also for the comfort of pilgrims." So the gardener invited them into the vineyards and told them to refresh themselves with the delicious produce. He also showed them the king's walks and arbors, where he delighted to visit. They lingered here and fell asleep. Now I saw in my dream that they talked more in their sleep at this time than they ever had in all their journey. Because I was in deep thought over this, the gardener spoke to me and said, "Why do you contemplate this matter? It is the nature of the fruit of the grapes of these vineyards to go down smooth and sweet, causing the lips of those who are asleep to speak." When they woke up, I saw that they determined to go up to the city. Being of pure gold, the city was so extremely bright and glorious that they could not look directly at it, except through a special instrument that veiled its brilliance. I saw that as they went on, two shining ones met them. They were dressed in clothing that shone like gold. Their faces also shone like the light. These two asked the pilgrims where they came from, and they answered. They also asked them where they had lodged, what difficulties and dangers they had experienced, and what comforts and pleasures they had met in the way. The pilgrims answered all their questions. Then they said, "You have only two more difficulties to meet with, and then you will be in the city." Christian and Hopeful asked the Shining Ones to go along with them, and they told them that they would. "But," they said, "you must obtain it by your own faith." And so I saw in my dream that they went on together until they came to within sight of the gate. Then I saw a river that flowed between them and the gate. There was no bridge for crossing over, and the river was very deep. The pilgrims were astonished by the sight of the river, but the Shining Ones said, "You must go through it, or you cannot approach the gate." The pilgrims then began to inquire as to whether there was any other way to the gate. They answered, "Yes, but there have only been two, Enoch and Elijah, who have been permitted to walk that path since the foundation of the world. It will not happen again until the last trumpet shall sound." Then the pilgrims, and especially Christian, began to lose hope and become despondent. They looked this way and that, but could find no way to escape the river. They asked the Shining Ones if the river was of the same depth in every place. The men answered, "No, but we cannot help you in this case either, because the waters are of greater or lesser depth, depending on your faith in the king of the place." Christian and Hopeful finally resolved to go into the water. Upon entering, however, Christian began to sink. Crying out to his good friend Hopeful, he said, "The engulfing waters threaten me, the deep surrounds me, the waves of death swirl about me, the torrents of destruction overwhelm me." Then Hopeful said to him, "Cheer up, my brother. I can feel the bottom, and it is firm." Christian responded, "Oh, my friend, the sorrows of death have surrounded me. I shall not see the land that flows with milk and honey." At that a great darkness and horror fell upon Christian. It was so intense that he could not see a thing ahead of him. Also, to a great degree, he lost his senses, and he was able neither to remember nor to talk rationally about any of the blessings and encouragements that he had met with in the way of his pilgrimage. Every word he spoke engendered a terror of mind and heart that he would surely be lost in that river and never obtain entrance at the gate. Here also, as those who stood watching perceived, he was troubled greatly by thoughts of the sins he had committed, both before and since he had become a pilgrim. It was also observed that he was being afflicted with visions of hobgoblins and evil spirits. He talked endlessly about them. Hopeful, therefore, had quite a task keeping his brother's head above water. Sometimes he would be completely under the water, and then for a while he would rise up again, half dead. Hopeful also would try to encourage him, saying, "Brother, I see the gate, and men standing by it to receive us." But Christian would answer, "It's you. It's you they're waiting for. You've been hopeful ever since I met you." "And so have you, Christian," Hopeful would answer. "Ah, brother," Christian responded, "surely if I was righteous, he would now arise to help me. But because of my sins, he has brought me into a snare and left me." "But my brother," said Hopeful, "you've completely forgotten the text where it said of the wicked, 'For there are no pangs in their death, but their strength is firm.' They are not in trouble as other men, nor are they plagued like other men. These troubles and distresses that you are going through in these waters are no sign that God has forsaken you. They are sent only to test you, to see whether you will remember what you have received of His goodness up to this time, and whether you will lean on Him in your time of distress." Then I saw in my dream that Christian was thoughtful for a while, and Hopeful, adding another word of exhortation, said, "Be of good cheer, for Jesus Christ is making you whole." Immediately Christian yelled with a loud voice, "Oh, I see him again, and he tells me, 'When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you.'" And then they both took courage, and after that the enemy was as still as stone until they had crossed over. Therefore Christian was able to find ground to stand on, and so it followed that the rest of the river was shallow. Thus they got over. Now upon the river bank on the other side they saw the two shining ones again, waiting for them. When they came up out of the water, the two greeted them, saying, "We are ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation." And so they went along together toward the gate. Now I would have you take note of the fact that the city stood upon a mighty hill. The pilgrims, however, went up the hill with ease, because they had these two shining ones leading them by the arms. They also had left their mortal garments behind them in the river, for though those garments entered the river with them, the pilgrims came out without them. Therefore they moved forward with great agility and speed, in spite of the fact that the foundation upon which the city was built was higher than the clouds. And so they went up through the regions of space, happily talking as they went, being much comforted that they had safely gotten over the river and had such glorious companions to help them. The shining ones described to them the glorious splendor of the place. They told them that the beauty and glory of it was inexpressible. They said, "You are coming to Mount Zion, to the heavenly Jerusalem, the city of the living God, and to thousands and thousands of angels in joyful assembly, and to the spirits of righteous men made perfect. You are now going to the paradise of God, where you will see the tree of life and eat of its never-fading fruit. White robes will be given to you upon your arrival, and every day you will walk and talk with the King, even throughout all the days of eternity. There you will never again see such things as sorrow, sickness, affliction, and death, for the old order of things has passed away. You are now going to join Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the prophets, ones who were taken away by God from the evil to come, and who are now cradled in eternal rest and walking in eternal righteousness." Hopeful and Christian then asked, "What will be required of us in this holy place?" "You must receive consolation for all your toil, and receive joy for all your sorrow. You must reap what you have sown, the fruit of all your prayers and tears and suffering for the King on the way. In that place you must receive your treasures and wear crowns of gold. You will receive perpetual joy from beholding the Holy One, for there you shall see Him as He is. You will also serve Him there continually with praise, shouting, and thanksgiving. You so desired to serve Him in the world, but it was very difficult because of your human frailties. Your eyes will be delighted by seeing and your ears with hearing the Mighty One. You will once again enjoy your friends and loved ones who have gone there before you. And not only that, you will have the joy of receiving every one who follows after you into that holy place. You will be clothed with glory and majesty, and you will be suitably equipped to ride out with the King of glory. When the trumpet sounds and he comes in the clouds upon the wings of the wind, you will come with him. And when he sits upon his throne of judgment, you will sit beside him. Yes, and when he passes sentence upon all the evildoers, whether angels or men, you will also have a voice in that judgment, because they were your enemies as well as his. And when at the sound of the trumpet he again returns to the city, you will return also, and you will be with him forevermore. So now see how the holy pilgrims ride. Clouds are their chariots, angels their guide. Who for this joy wouldn't all hazards run? What provision there is when this world is done. Now as they drew ever closer to the gate, a throng of the heavenly host came out to meet them. The two shining ones addressed them and said, "These are the men who have loved our Lord when they were in the world, and who have left all for his holy name. He has sent us forth to receive them, and we have brought them this far on their desired journey, so that they may go in and look with joy into the face of their Redeemer." And then the heavenly host gave a great shout, saying, "Blessed are those who are invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb." At this same time several of the king's trumpeters came out to meet them. They were clothed in brilliant white raiment, and blowing their trumpets they welcomed Christian and Hopeful from the world with 10,000 shouts and trumpet blasts. The heavens resounded with their loud and melodious sounds. After this the pilgrims were surrounded by a joyful procession. Some were in front of them, some behind, and some on either side, as if guarding them while they traversed the upper regions. As they walked along, the trumpeters continually sounded their trumpets, filling the heavens with their jubilant sounds. It would have seemed to any observer that all of heaven had come down to meet them. So they all proceeded together, and Christian and Hopeful could see how exceedingly great was the joy of the crowds as they came to meet them, and how welcome the two of them were in their fellowship. It seemed, too, the men as if they had already reached heaven before they had come to it. They were overwhelmed with joy and lost in wonder at seeing the angels and listening to their heavenly music. They could see the city, and it seemed to them that they could also hear all the bells within it ringing to welcome them. But what gave them the greatest joy of all was the thought that they themselves could be so fully accepted as to be invited to make their own dwelling here, with such companions, not just for a short time, but for ever and ever. Oh, how could tongue or pen ever express such rapturous joy? And so they approached at the gate. And when they arrived at it, they saw written above it in gold letters, "Blessed are those who do his commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life, and may enter through the gates into the city." And then I saw in my dream that the shining ones told them to knock at the gate. When they did, some who lived inside looked over from a vantage point above across the gate. Enoch, Moses, Elijah, and others. The shining ones said, "These pilgrims have come from the city of destruction because of the love that they possess for the king of this place." Then the pilgrims presented the certificates that they had been given them at the beginning. The certificates were brought to the king, and upon reviewing them he asked, "Where are the men?" The messengers answered, "They are standing outside the gate." The king then gave a command to open the gate, saying, "Open the gates, that the righteous nation may enter, the nation that keeps faith." Now I saw in my dream that these two men went in at the gate, and as they entered they were suddenly and gloriously transfigured. The clothes they now wore shone like gold. They were met by some who presented them with harps and crowns. The harps were given them for praising the king, and the crowns were bestowed upon them for their own honor. Then I heard in my dream that all the bells in the city rang out again for joy, and I heard it said, "Enter into the joy of the Lord." I could also hear Christian and Hopeful, along with the multitude, singing with loud voices, "To him who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb be praise, and honor and glory and power forever and ever." Now just as the gates had opened to let the men in, I looked in after them. I could see that the city shone like the sun. The streets were paved with gold, and on them walked many saints with crowns on their heads and palm branches in their hands. They were playing golden harps as they sang praises to God. I could also see there were those with wings, and they addressed one another continually, saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty." I wished that I myself was among those whom I had seen, but after this the gates were once again closed. Now while I was still pondering all these things, I turned my head to look back, and I saw Ignorance approaching the far bank of the river. Soon he was able to cross over with less than half the difficulty that the other two men had experienced, for it just so happened that there was a ferryman waiting there named Vain Hope, and he ferried Ignorance across. And so Ignorance, like the others, ascended the hill to reach the gate. He came alone, however, no one met him with the least bit of encouragement. When he approached the gate, he looked up at the writing above and then began to knock, supposing that he would quickly be admitted. The men on top of the roof looked down and asked, "Where have you come from, and what do you want?" He replied, "I ate and drank in the presence of the king, and he taught in my streets." Then they asked him for his certificate so that they might take it in and show it to the king. So he fumbled in his clothing for one, but found none. Then they asked, "Don't you have one?" Ignorance remained silent. So they told the king, but he would not come down to see him. Instead, he commanded the two shining ones who had escorted Christian and Hopeful to the city to go out and take Ignorance and bind him hand and foot and have him carried away. And so they seized him and carried him through the air to the door that I had seen in the side of the hill, and there they cast him. And then I saw that there was a way to hell not only from the city of destruction, but even from the gate of heaven itself. At this I awoke and realized it had all been a dream. Now, reader, I have told my dream to thee. See if you can interpret it to me, or to yourself or your neighbor, but take heed of misrepresenting, for that indeed will bring you no good, but instead abuse. By misinterpreting, evil ensues. Take heed also that you don't be extreme in playing with the limits of my dream. Don't let this allegory now conclude by sending you laughing or causing a feud. The childish or fools in this way can be. You, though, the substance of my work must see. Draw back the curtains. Look within my veil. Ponder my metaphors, and please do not fail. There, if you seek them, are things you will find that will be helpful to an honest mind. So what if my dross you find there be bold? Throw it away, yet preserve all the gold. What if my gold is wrapped up in ore? Who tosses the apple because of the core? But if you cast all away as just vain, I do not know when I might dream again.